And to that piece of lieutenant that's always on his podcast, bash us, him.
All right, attention to roll call.
Oh, good morning, everybody. 8:05 live Eastern Time, 6:05 Mountain Time for me right now. Enjoying traveling on the West Coast. How's everybody doing this morning? Drone City, NYPD. What's up, brother?
Nothing. I mean, I hate to even do this episode, but it was such major news yesterday. I think this is the third time that Eric Adams and Kaz Daughtry have announced this drone as a first responder program. I believe they did it in the summer. I think they did it earlier than that. I believe early spring, right when the spring started as well, right as the crime spiked in Central Park. I think that we're getting a lot of people have been reaching out to me. You guys are missing the mark on the drones. I think let's just talk about the drones, like how we see drones helpful and where we see that Kaz Daughtry and Eric Adams are completely missing the mark or misrepresenting what's going on. Like, so I'm just going to put it that you're in charge of a police department. You want drones.
It's funny you say that. I've been receiving the same phone calls and constantly I'm talking to people and they're like, dude, why do you think the drones are bad? I said, wait a minute. At what point did you hear John and myself indicate the drones are not useful? I think you missed the mark. And what I mean by that, I said, we're not saying the drones are not a good tool and resource. I see it as a supplemental tool. I think, John, you pretty much have said the same thing.
100%.
But I think if you're actually listening to Kaz Daughtry, right, because he's the drone czar for the NYPD, and you listen to Eric Adams when they talk about drones, they're pushing the drone program as a replacement for the human element, the replacement for the police officer right now. And I think right now there's an extreme burden on a diminished police department. We talk about morale, how low morale is. Not for John Schell. According to John Schell, everything's great in the locker room. But the reality is morale is at all-time low. It's completely diminished. You have cops, sergeants, lieutenants, they're just exhausted. They're overworked. They're burning the candle on both ends. These guys are working overtime so much. But yet, right now, as it stands, they're going to need 109 police officers to start this drone program. So that means 109 police officers are going to be removed from the streets. So the other police officers that still have their boots on the ground are going to be further exhausted and further pay the burden while they start to administer this drone program as a replacement, not a supplemental tool. There is no replacement for human element. Absolutely not. John and I even talk about it, right? Using AI for the podcast to put out clips and things like that. But we said we can't even do that because we need to make sure that there's proper perspective and the proper points are put out there. It's the same thing that goes for drones. You need that human element to know where to watch and where to canvas and where to deploy. There's a lot involved. It's not just a program that can replace the human element. That's the problem I see. I've said this over a year ago. I had my finger out like, wow, look at all this AI stuff. They're trying to replace the human element, replace the police officer. That's why they don't care about manpower. John.
I agree. I take heed when I hear, what a cost-saving option this is. I do believe it's a huge cost-saving option when we talk about bringing up helicopters. Drones are actually definitely much cheaper. There are numerous jobs where a helicopter response is required. Missing children. If you have a fire, you want to get on the roof. I do believe that FDNY is using drones as well. So I don't think we should duplicate that. I don't think NYPD needs their own drones. We should be there in case something happens to the FDNY drone. They need help. I could see that we have drone teams. Kaz Daughtry has said, I believe he has 60 police officers assigned to the drone unit and 109 drones assigned to the fleet. I don't have a problem with any of that. I don't think that we ever said that that's a problem. What we said is they're misrepresenting how this is going to be used. Saying this is the future of policing is not an honest statement to me. It's about as dishonest as saying crime is down. So I do think that this is a great supplement when it comes to policing. Like I said, if you have a missing child, right? What are we required to do? If you have a missing child in a building, you're required to check all the vestibules, all the alleyways, the rooftop. This is something that can be done at a moment's notice with a drone while the officer's still on the job inside. We don't waste valuable time. I think that's great. Like I said, I thought it was unbelievable, the response in Dudleston, Queens at the home invasion. I thought that was a great response. Weather wasn't great. It was nighttime. They were able to get a bird's eye view of the house. Choppers weren't able to get up. And honestly, at that point, I don't even think the chopper should be utilized in those situations. I think we need to start looking at when drones, specifically what 911 calls drones should respond to, that they should be required the same way in certain jobs we're required to get a chopper up, and then see which ones aren't. Which one is it? We need a helicopter for this one. Which one do we need a drone for? Obviously, the drones are the more cost-saving option. I believe that they're a great tool, a great resource, and could save not only the public's life, but police officers' life. But let's have an honest conversation about the capability of drones. And should this be the focus of the NYPD? Should they work on it? Yeah, absolutely. Should the NYPD have drones? 100%. They should have had them 10 years ago. They should have had them 10 years ago. I don't think this is just like, Eric Adams reinvented the trash can, saying this is a trash revolution. I don't believe that this is the future of policing. I believe this is a valuable tool that the cops need. I don't know why we needed 3 press conferences over the last several months to continuously say that this is the future of police, and the same way they pushed the subway robot as that's the future of the transit police.
Well, that's another huge factor with this administration. Why do we need a media tour around this whole drone program? The drone program is nothing new. It's a tool we should have utilized years ago. But since we're here, I think it's a great tool. It's a great resource, supplemental to the human element, supplemental, used as a resource for a particular job. Sometimes it can require aviation, and sometimes drones are the better option, depending on what the incident is or what the event is that's put in front of us. But why do we need a media tour? Constantly talking about these drones. If drones are so effective, then just give one press conference or maybe 2, and just put it out there. Just put it out there and do the program. Why do we need a media tour to constantly sell this particular type of technology or artificial intelligence? And Kaz Daughtry is trying to say it's not artificial intelligence by it. Absolutely it is. But with this technology, just push it out there and try it. So now we see, it's going to cost a lot of money. We see the logistics that are involved right now. And Kaz Daughtry's not being honest by that. Now he said it's going to require 60 police officers, right? So I think I reversed the numbers. I said there's going to be 109 police officers. So 60 police officers, 109 actual drones itself. So this requires manpower, it requires training, it requires funding to actually get this program off the ground. And then we also, according to Kaz Daughtry, we heard that eventually they want to put a drone in every patrol car. This is logistics. That's something that the NYPD just never could get their hands on and never could get wrapped around properly. We see the patrol cars throughout the city, active or retired members. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Other agencies that are listed right now in this podcast, you might have the same issues with your department. I'm not sure, depending on the type of municipality. But the NYPD was never good when it came to having equipment in the car. We're always missing just a spare tire. You're missing lug nuts. There's always something missing. First aid kit is not there. When it came time when we had PPE for gas masks, that stuff was always missing. There's always, various types of PPE throughout my career. It just wasn't there. So how are we going to have a drone in every car? Now we're going to have 60 drones. 60 manpower monitoring these drones. It's just the logistics. I just don't think the NYPD can handle it. It's a good resource, but why do we have to sell it? Just push it out there and let's see how it operates.
Yeah, I think it's a good tool. I think this is a promotional video for Skydio. I think this is only one of the style of drones that the NYPD has. They have numerous style. I believe this was the model that was tested yesterday. We'll bring you that press conference as well. Right after this, just to show the capabilities. But I think, there's a lot of different things now when we bring in technology that people have to start looking at. I think first off, civil liberties, right? I think that's a big factor when we talk about patrolling the skies. How many drones do you want to see above you as you walk around the streets in New York City, as you walk through Central Park? Are those drones recording you? Where's that data stored? What type of data is stored from that video? Where is it kept? Who has access to it? These are all questions that need to come up, I think, ahead of time before we get there, right? We only have 109 drones now. But what's that 109 drones going to be in 20 years? How many is that going to be? What is is that the type of policing we want? Is that the type of surveillance that we want? I mean, I know we seen 2 years ago where they were asking you to walk around. I mean, I know myself, I refused to do it, but they were asking you to walk around with a card and to be able to get into a restaurant that gave away your private medical information, to go into a play, to go into a movie theater. I mean, potentially, when I look at how scary that could be, it could lead into a completely dystopian future. Now, to use it to respond to emergencies, I have no problem with it at all. When we talk about patrol, I get a little weary. I'm not going to lie. Like the hair stands up on my arm a little bit. I'm like, what does patrol look like? What is that? Are you checking my medical data? Like, what does that look like in 20 years from now? Obviously, right now, that's not the conversation. Right now, the conversation is, we're patrolling. We're looking for crimes. We're making sure there's no anomalies in the park. But again, you're in a public area. I don't believe God put eyes everywhere in the world. And I mean, do you want to live in a surveillance state in New York City? Is that a comfortable environment? Is that a sane environment? Is that a constitutional environment? And I'm not sure that it is or it isn't. I just think those conversations haven't been had and the forward looking hasn't been done yet. So when we start to look at that technology right now, I'm saying I have no issue with it being used as a tool to respond to emergencies, and then we could weigh in on that.
VSS Ventura, shout out, brother. His comment is hilarious, and this is true. He said that drone would be covered in spilled coffee and powdered sugar in weeks' time. That's hilarious. And Sleepy Joe, shout out to you, brother. Thank you so much. $9.99 to the podcast. We're getting ourselves some coffee and donuts. He says, morning, lieutenants. And he's reiterating what I've been saying here about logistics, man. We never have stuff in the cars. Morning, lieutenants. We barely had crime scene tape in every RMP and had to stuff it back in the trunks after the crime scene was done. Absolutely. I mean, every time I was working, I'm sure, John, the same thing with you. You're on a crime scene, you're shooting. What's the hardest thing to find? Does anybody have crime scene tape? There'll be 10 patrol cars and we can't even find crime scene tapes. But yet we're going to find drones in every car. That's what I'm saying. Logistically, the NYPD was never effective at keeping these cars equipped with the proper equipment. With that being said, I think that the drone itself is great. It's supplemental, but I do think that the NYPD, unfortunately, historically, has a history of distorting information and distorting a good thing. I wouldn't be surprised if eventually there's going to be some type of drone stat, and we'll see the upper echelon of the police department, we could assume, because we've seen it before, start to push, an event. Let's say, John, for instance, rhetorically speaking, let's say you and I are working together, we respond to a scene. You know what's going to happen at Comstat? Did John and Eric request for the drones? Did they deploy the drones from their car? How long did it take till the drone gets there? What was the scene? How many shootings were drones deployed? I could see the department completely distort this type of information. We've seen it before. I wouldn't be surprised. What do you think about that, John? I think that, there'll be some type of stat, and then they'll push drones, and we'll have to be, some chief's agenda will have to be on every scene. And that's unfortunate. That's where I see, rather it being something where we delegate the authority to our people to make that assessment if it's needed or not.
Again, I don't believe that this administration's too forward thinking, and I don't believe that this administration is too smart either. So I don't even believe the implementation of it. I believe the implementation of basically everything that they've been running has been an absolute disaster because they haven't been able to reasonably weigh out what should be done, how it should be done, and allow opinions. Right. So if you don't have opinions, I don't believe the implementation of it comes in correctly. If you speak out against this administration, it is perceived that you didn't clap long enough when somebody walked in their office for the 9,000th time since they've been appointed as a chief or commissioner or whatever, then you're not going to feel comfortable to weigh in. And I think there are great minds inside of the New York City Police Department, and on a technological end, on a structural engineering end, on an implementation end. I think there are great minds. I think those minds are not being allowed to flourish. So I think that, yeah, of course, you're always going to get somebody with rank that thinks they're smarter than everybody, that is gonna override everything and everybody. Eddie Nunes brings up the cost of the drones, $30K each, with enormous subscription fees. They dropped the DJI drones. So weird at the last press conference they did a few weeks ago about this. Kaz Daughtry said, we're getting rid of the DJI drones because they're Chinese based. When asked, he didn't respond to why that was. I believe there's some type of national security issue going on or something with that. I'm not sure what that was. I would like somebody to answer that question, preferably Kaz Daughtry, as to why those drones are no good. I agree there are much cheaper options when we're talking about when you're talking about having a handheld option. There's definitely cheap options out there. City procurement rules, which under Eric Adams have been blurred, definitely will come into play. It will raise the cost of even things like the cost for me and you to go buy a drone is going to be much cheaper than the cost for the city to go and buy a drone. And that's just the nature of city procurement rules. The $30K Skydio drone, I'm going to say right now, I think you are going to need some type of high-end option when we're talking police, when we're talking going to fires, missing children, going up at night. I think that, not only the cops, but the taxpayer are going to want the best capability out there for that. So I don't know that 30K is a lot. I know that the prescription fee is going to be a lot, though, because you have to think about it. The Kaz Daughtry says at the press conference, and we'll bring that to you, that they only have a 40-minute flight time, and that's depending on weather. So these drones are going to be docking. Say you have two in a precinct or two at a location. One's going to be docked, one's going to be up, and they're going to consistently flip and flop over, right? The maintenance on that drone, I don't even know. I don't know what the question that the media didn't ask yesterday, and the question I had, I actually wished I was there, is what's the lifespan of a drone regularly? How many charges is it capable of before you need to charge the battery? Before you need to get a different battery, excuse me. How often is maintenance required on these drones? Those are questions that weren't asked. Like, so how much are we doing maintenance? What's the required maintenance on it? How many times can we charge that drone reasonably before the battery needs to change? And then what does that look like from a civilian application to the way the police department's going to utilize it? Because don't tell me what's going on in West Palm Beach, Florida, or any other city in the world. What's it going to look like in New York City when we talk about our 911 operations and our emergency runs? Because you have to think the flow. Anybody that's been a cop, for those of you that don't know, you could just probably listen. If you hear a cop standing next to you, listen to his radio. It never stops. It never stops. 911 call, 911 call, 911 call. That's the radio. That's the 911 operator reading out calls. So I think those questions were severely missed at the press conference, as well as what 911 calls in particular is that drone going to respond to?
I can tell you, so historically looking at the NYPD, just like the body cameras started out was going to be pretty specific, excuse me, and tailored to when that body camera would be activated. And then what do we see? Eventually it just became activate the body camera, pretty much at every incident, unless you're dealing with a potential rape victim. So I think that's what's going to happen with the drones. And right, you assume what happened in the past is a reflection of what potentially is going to happen in the future. I think that they'll start out, use the drones at specific locations, and then there's going to be a bright idea by one of these chiefs, because they're such great leaders, use drones at everything. You can have drones at EMS calls. You'll have drones at every single job, unless it's something completely rare. The drone should not be there. Other than that, I guarantee at some point it will be all incidents, all events involving the police department. And the problem is this. The problem is the logistics. Again, I want to go back to that. Logistics are just a complete nightmare when it comes to the NYPD. Logistics are horrific. Everybody knows, John, you know it too. You did anti-crime. You have unmarks assigned to your unit. And I know for me, I would drive these cars till the wheels would fall off. Till I was pretty much that they couldn't run anymore, because I knew if I had to get one of my patrol cars, my unmarks, fixed, it took forever to get it back, because the mechanics are bogged down with work that they can't handle. I mean, just to get an oil change would take days, an oil change. So now we're talking about drones that need to get maintenance. What's the timeline with that? With deploying it out for mechanical maintenance and getting it back. Drone Ranger, this is hilarious, by the way. Shout out to Drone Ranger. This entire program is simply a giant cover-up in response to John and Eric catching Kaz with an Xbox controller earlier this year. That's spot on. It's not too far off, right,
It's
John?
honestly not far off at all. I mean, it's not far off at all.
And VSS Ventores, my brother, shout out to you. By the way, thanks so much for putting out that personalized information that he vested out with 12 years on the job. Shout out to you, brother. Unfortunately, you sound extremely intelligent, and they shouldn't have let you go, but take your skills somewhere else where they actually value you. VSS Ventores, $5 to the podcast, coffee and donuts. Love you, brother. Appreciate it. Says daily tribute for the day. I'm sure DroneStat would be a thing. Absolutely. I would put my money. You got ComStat, ChockStat, DomStat, DroneStat. Throw that in there. Some useless chief flapping his oily jowls about proper drone use. That's definitely coming. And that's the problem with the NYPD. We'll have a good tool, a good source, a good resource, something supplemental, and then the leadership of the NYPD, they'll screw it up. And I'm sure this administration will make it far worse.
No, yeah, it's crazy. Like I said, I just don't think that the thinking's happening. I think a big thing for this administration and why they're pushing the drones, in my opinion, I think I said it on the last time we spoke about this, is the 911 response times. I don't believe that the drone response time should be considered the official response time. I think there needs to be a drone response time. So we'll play this video from Skydio. So, and what this video is going to show you is that when a 911 call comes over, the drone operator could hit a button and send the drone there, and that is autonomous. It'll go directly to the location, and then the drone operator has to weigh in from there, obviously, right? But it'll send it right out there. So they're saying you could get anywhere, depending on the deployment, you could get anywhere in a minute. I don't believe that should stop the clock. I think that is a response time. I'm glad it does. As quick as that could be is great. When we're talking about missing children, when we're talking about fires, when we're talking about natural disasters, when we're talking about shots fired, right? Absolutely. Boom, hit the button, send the drone, get eyes up in the sky. What's the response time on the drone? Clock still running. What's the response time by when cops get there? And I think what initially, and I don't even know, I have no idea, but I believe that it's only one response time. I believe that drone operator is like, I'm 84, and it stops the clock, And guess what? You as a New York City resident, you were waiting a half hour for a 911 response call, but the PD is telling you, no, 3 minutes. We're there in 3 minutes. You're like, well, why did I wait a half hour? I brought in a testimony not too long ago about a girl who waited an hour while her father lay dying for an EMS response. So 911 response times are big. I don't think it's anything we should play with. And I'm going to hope, and I'm going to hope, but I don't think that that's the case, that they're not going to attempt to blur the lines of 911 response times utilizing the drone's response. And unfortunately, that's what I hear and that's what I see. Eric, I don't know if we said this already, but Sleepy Joe, shout out to you. $9.99 to the podcast. Morning lieutenants. We barely had crime scene tape in every RMP and had to put it back in the trunk after the crime was done. 100%. I agree with you. And then another $9.99 to the podcast. JF $9.99. Good morning, gentlemen. HR 2684, Counting CCP Drones Act, banned DJI as a threat to national security. Thank you. That's the reason they got rid of him right there. Yeah, he never went into it at the press conference, but he did say that, they're Chinese, they're made in China, but he never elaborated on what that was. So, wow, I didn't know that myself. So, are they banned for civilian use as well? Because I feel like I just seen them in Best Buy. So that's weird. I feel like I just seen DJI drones in Best Buy. So wow, I didn't know that. Okay, thank you for bringing that in, Jay. We appreciate that.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned it before in the episode. We speak about this all the time, and I think it's really important to know, right? We had, for years, it was a huge debate in the city, and we see how that went when it came to stop, question, possibly frisk, which is actually a Supreme Court case, People versus DeBoer, and also Terry versus Ohio. We actually had actual Supreme Court cases to support the stop, question, and possibly frisk. An amazing tool, an amazing resource to actually be intrusive, do intrusive police work. And what happened with that? On a prior administration and prior administrations carrying over, again, because of CompStat, misused and abused, and it got to the point where people created so much opposition and became polarizing, stop, question, possibly frisk. But that's actual a Supreme Court case. We don't have a Supreme Court case yet on drones, not that I know of, and I read Supreme Court cases constantly. So eventually we'll get to some point because we have to talk about Fourth Amendment rights and civil liberties. I want tools and I want resources and I want a safe society. I want to help. That's why I became a cop. I've always found myself to, enjoy a life of service between the military and the police department. But I don't want to live in a police state either. And we have to make sure that this is going to be used properly and it's going to be done as intrusive police work and not intrusive on someone's life when it's not necessary. So a lot of kinks that have to go into be worked out. They're selling this thing, but what they have not spoke about is how they're going to respect civil liberties and make sure that the Fourth Amendment right is upheld when it comes to the drones. So we have not heard that. All we hear is about the positive elements about it. And we've not heard how everything is actually going to be implemented and actually worked out. So I think there's a lot of stuff missing when it comes to these conversations. They're selling a product, but they haven't sold everything that surrounds that product.